Right now, somewhere in a Pentagon briefing room, officials are quietly preparing for a threat that most Americans have never heard of. A threat that could crack open every encrypted military communication, every classified satellite link, every nuclear command system, virtually overnight. It's not a new missile. It's not a cyber weapon in the traditional sense. It's a computer, one that doesn't exist yet, but one that both Washington and Beijing are racing to build first. And in the last few weeks, that race has quietly become one of the most urgent priorities in American defense policy. To understand why this matters, you have to understand what quantum computing actually threatens to do. Almost every secure system you rely on, banking, email, military communications, satellite links, nuclear command and control, is protected by encryption built on a simple mathematical trick. Certain math problems, like factoring enormous numbers, are so difficult that even the world's fastest supercomputers would take longer than the age of the universe to crack them. That difficulty is the entire foundation of digital trust. It's why your bank password is safe, why classified cables stay classified, and why a nuclear launch code can be transmitted without fear of interception. A sufficiently powerful quantum computer breaks that foundation. Using specialized quantum algorithms, a machine with enough stable, error-corrected qubits could, in theory, solve those same math problems in a fraction of the time, turning decades of unbreakable encryption into something that could be unlocked in hours or even minutes. That's not a hypothetical inconvenience. That's a scenario where an adversary could read intercepted military communications, unlock classified files, or spoof secure command systems the entire modern military depends on to function. Here's the part that should really concern you. This threat doesn't require a working quantum computer to exist today. It only requires patience. Intelligence agencies around the world are believed to be running what's known as a harvest now, decrypt later strategy. Encrypted data, intercepted today, useless with current technology, gets stored and archived, waiting for the day a quantum computer becomes powerful enough to unlock it. Military secrets that are sensitive for 10, 20, even 30 years, weapons designs, troop movements, submarine locations, diplomatic cables, could already be sitting in a foreign server somewhere, waiting for that future key to turn. Which means the danger isn't only in the future. It's already happening right now in real time, and every day that passes without protection is another day of exposure. That's exactly why, on June 22nd, 2026, the President of the United States signed not one but two executive orders in a single day, orders that quietly declared a new kind of arms race, one fought not with missiles or tanks, but with atoms, photons, and the strange laws of quantum physics. The first of these orders, Executive Order Stortum 411, is focused on acceleration. It directs the Department of Defense, now also operating under the secondary title of the Department of War, to identify and field at least 3 next-generation quantum sensor projects within a remarkably tight window by September 30th, 2028. That's a little over 2 years from now. In government timelines, especially for cutting-edge physics-based technology, that's an extraordinarily aggressive deadline. The order doesn't stop there. It also tasks the Department of Energy, working alongside the Pentagon and the National Security Agency, with building at least one powerful, reliable quantum computer for scientific research, to be deployed at a site that has yet to be determined. Other agencies, including the Department of Commerce, NASA, and the National Science Foundation, are being pulled into the effort as well, each assigned to explore different angles of quantum sensing and quantum networking, a field where the United States has historically lagged behind, particularly compared to China's heavy, sustained investment. The second order, Executive Order 14409, takes a different angle. Rather than building new quantum capability, it's about defense, specifically defending against the quantum threat to encryption. This order focuses on accelerating the adoption of post-quantum cryptography across civilian federal agencies and their contractors. It's worth noting that national security systems, the most sensitive military and intelligence networks, are actually exempted from this particular order, with the Pentagon playing only an advisory role. Why? Because the Defense Department has already been working on this problem quietly for years, and just 2 days after these executive orders were signed, it revealed exactly how far that effort has come. On June 24th, 2026, the Pentagon released its own post-quantum cryptography strategy, a 25-page plan that doesn't mince words about the scale of the danger. The department frames the eventual emergence of full-scale quantum computing as, in its own language, an existential threat to national security and to global military dominance. That's not marketing language. That's the Pentagon's own chosen phrase, and it tells you everything about how seriously this is being taken at the highest levels. The strategy lays out 5 major lines of effort. First, centralizing governance across the department so that the transition isn't handled piecemeal by dozens of disconnected offices. Second, scanning every system, every network, every piece of legacy infrastructure for quantum vulnerabilities, and building a migration framework to fix them. Third, developing and refining the post-quantum cryptographic algorithms and protocols themselves in close coordination with national and international standards bodies. Fourth, integrating secure, quantum-resistant communications directly into military systems. And fifth, physically deploying that protection across every warfighting domain, land, sea, air, space, and cyber, without slowing down day-to-day military operations in the process. The scope of this undertaking is genuinely enormous. Every piece of cryptography currently protecting national security systems, weapons platforms, command and control networks, satellite communications, has to be identified, evaluated for quantum vulnerability, and eventually replaced. The department's own timeline calls for high-impact systems to be protected by 2030, with the entire department transitioned by 2031. Officials have acknowledged that some of this will be relatively straightforward. Cloud-based commercial services, for instance, can often be updated quickly. But other parts of the challenge are far harder. Weapon systems that were designed decades ago, built long before anyone seriously worried about quantum computers, and complex interconnected military networks that can't simply be taken offline for a security patch, will take significantly longer to secure. And every month of delay is a month those systems remain exposed to a threat that grows more real with each passing year. Kirsten Davies, the Pentagon's chief information officer, put it bluntly when the strategy was unveiled. She said the plan secures the tactical edge and the safety of America's satellite communications and command systems. But she was also careful to note that this cryptography overhaul is only the first step. Speaking publicly, just a day after the strategy's release, Davies emphasized that network modernization alone won't be enough to fully prepare the military for what's coming. The quantum threat, in other words, isn't a box you check once and move on from. It's a shifting target that requires sustained long-term investment and an entirely new mindset. Encryption, though, is only half of this story, and arguably not even the more exciting half. While the cryptography side of quantum technology is about defense, about closing a vulnerability before adversaries can exploit it, there's an entirely different branch of quantum science that the military sees as offering something the country doesn't currently have at all, a genuine new capability. That branch is quantum sensing. According to the Defense Science Board, an independent panel of scientific advisors to the Department of Defense, quantum sensing is currently the most mature military application of quantum technology, and it's already described as being, quote, poised for mission use. Unlike quantum computing, which still requires years, possibly a full decade or more, of engineering breakthroughs before it becomes militarily useful, quantum sensors are close to ready right now. So what exactly is a quantum sensor, and why does the military care so much about it? At its core, quantum sensing uses the strange, ultra-sensitive properties of quantum physics, things like atomic superposition and entanglement, to detect incredibly small changes in the environment. Tiny shifts in magnetic fields, gravitational fields, electric fields, or timing. Classical sensors, the kind used throughout the military today, have always faced a frustrating trade-off. You could build a sensor that was extremely sensitive, or one that was small enough, light enough, and power efficient enough to actually carry into the field, but rarely both at once. Engineers call this the sensitivity versus size, weight, and power trade-off, or sensitivity swap for short. Quantum sensors are not bound by the same physical limitations. They offer a path to sensors that are both remarkably sensitive and small enough to deploy on aircraft, ships, submarines, and eventually even individual soldiers. The Defense Innovation Unit has already launched a major initiative built entirely around this opportunity. Announced in support of the June executive orders, the initiative is designed to move quantum sensing technology out of research labs and directly into the hands of the Joint Force. It's backed by up to $200 million in investment over just the next year. The project is organized around 4 core lines of effort: electric field sensors and magnetometers, gravity gradiometers, tactical precision clocks, and broader component technology insertions that can be integrated across a range of platforms. Kyle Norman, who leads the Defense Innovation Unit's quantum sensing team, explained the stakes in stark terms. The Department of War, he said, must accelerate the deployment and commercialization of quantum sensing to maintain superiority of battlespace awareness, speed of decision, and operational dominance. That phrase, speed of decision, is worth sitting with for a moment. In modern warfare, the side that understands the battlefield first and acts on that understanding fastest often wins before the other side even realizes what's happening. Quantum sensors promise to compress that decision cycle in ways that current technology simply cannot. It's also worth pausing on just how counterintuitive this entire field of physics actually is, because it's easy to lose sight of that in the middle of budget numbers and program names. Quantum sensing works because individual atoms, cooled and manipulated under carefully controlled laboratory conditions, behave in ways that classical physics simply cannot explain. They can exist in a strange state of superposition, effectively occupying multiple configurations at once. And they can become entangled with one another so that measuring one instantly reveals information about the other, regardless of distance. Scientists have learned to exploit these bizarre properties not as curiosities confined to physics textbooks, but as extraordinarily precise measurement tools. Tools sensitive enough to detect a single photon, a fractional shift in gravity, or a magnetic field, so faint it would be completely invisible to any sensor built on conventional principles. That's the raw scientific foundation the military is now racing to turn into hardware. Soldiers, sailors, and pilots can actually carry and depend on in the field. Consider what these sensors could actually do in practice. High-stability tactical clocks could give military units precision timing that doesn't depend on GPS signals, which are notoriously vulnerable to jamming and spoofing by adversaries. That alone would be a massive advantage in any conflict where an enemy tries to disrupt satellite navigation. Highly sensitive magnetometers and gravity sensors could detect faint anomalies in the Earth's magnetic or gravitational field, anomalies that might reveal the presence of a submarine moving silently underwater, a target that today can only reliably be found using active sonar, a method that has the significant downside of announcing your own presence the moment you use it. Researchers and defense analysts have specifically pointed to quantum sensing as a promising path toward detecting hostile submarines without ever needing to ping them with sonar at all, effectively finding an enemy that doesn't know it's being watched. This isn't purely theoretical anymore either. The U.S. Army has already developed what it's calling a breakthrough sensor, built on something called Rydberg atoms, a class of highly excited atomic states that are extraordinarily sensitive to electromagnetic fields. This Rydberg atom-based sensor is designed to help soldiers detect complex electromagnetic signals across the battlefield, essentially giving frontline troops a far more sensitive picture of the electromagnetic environment around them than traditional receivers could ever provide. It's a small but telling sign that quantum sensing has already crossed the line from laboratory curiosity into fielded, tested military hardware. The Defense Innovation Unit has also made a deliberate choice to lean on dual-use commercial technology rather than building everything from scratch inside government labs. Quantum sensing breakthroughs in fields like mineral exploration, oil and gas surveying, and advanced medical imaging are all being examined for military applications, a strategy designed to lower costs and speed up fielding by tapping into innovation that's already happening in the private sector. It's a recognition that in a fast-moving technology race, the Pentagon doesn't have the luxury of reinventing every wheel from zero. Now, let's turn to the more distant, but arguably higher stakes, front of this race, quantum computing itself. If quantum sensing is close to ready today, full-scale, fault-tolerant quantum computing remains a genuine engineering frontier, and building the actual machine capable of breaking modern encryption or solving previously unsolvable defense problems is a challenge on the scale of the original space race. This is where the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, comes in. Through its quantum benchmarking initiative known as QBI, DARPA has taken on the job of rigorously testing and verifying which, if any, of the competing approaches to quantum computing actually has a realistic shot at reaching what's called utility scale, meaning a quantum computer whose practical real-world value finally exceeds the enormous cost of building and running it. The program's target date for reaching that milestone is 2033. QBI isn't a typical government funding program where money simply gets handed out. It's structured as a staged verification process. Companies first go through Stage A, a 6-month period where they characterize their unique technical concept for building a useful, fault-tolerant quantum computer. Those that pass move into the far more intensive Stage B, a full year spent developing detailed research and development plans, identifying the risks in their approach, and specifying exactly what prototypes are needed to reduce those risks before moving forward. It's designed, quite deliberately, to separate genuine technical progress from hype. And DARPA has been explicit that this isn't a competition in the traditional sense. The agency has stated it supports every viable approach with available funding, rather than betting everything on a single technology. As of early 2026, 11 companies had advanced into Stage B of the program. That list includes some of the biggest and most recognizable names in quantum computing, IBM and IonQ among them, alongside a wider group of specialized firms including Atom Computing, Dirac, Nord Quantique, Photonic Incorporated, Quantinuum, Quantum Motion, Quera Computing, Silicon Quantum Computing, and Xanadu. Each of these companies is pursuing a genuinely different physical approach to building a quantum computer, some using trapped ions, some using superconducting circuits, some using photons of light, and some using silicon-based quantum dots, reflecting just how unsettled the fundamental engineering question still is. Nobody, including DARPA itself, knows for certain which physical approach will ultimately win. What's notable is that DARPA didn't stop there. It has since reopened the Quantum Benchmarking Initiative to new entrants, publishing a fresh call for companies in November of 2025, with new abstracts due by the end of July 2026 and full proposals due by the end of September. Jared Stoutemore, who leads the program, explained the reasoning behind reopening the door. He noted that both the quantum benchmarking initiative and the broader quantum computing field have advanced rapidly since the program's first call for participants, and it now seems increasingly likely that someone, somewhere, will succeed in building a genuinely utility-scale quantum computer by 2033. What remains completely uncertain is exactly which team, or combination of teams, will actually cross that finish line first. That uncertainty is precisely why the Pentagon isn't waiting around to place a single bet. Instead, the strategy across the entire government is to fund and evaluate as many credible paths as possible simultaneously, hedging against the very real risk that any one specific technical approach could hit an unexpected wall. It's an expensive strategy, but in a technology race this consequential, betting everything on one horse would be far riskier than spreading investment across the field. And make no mistake, this is very much a race, not a solo research project. China has been investing heavily and consistently in quantum technology for years, with a particular focus on quantum communications and quantum networking, areas where American investment has, until quite recently, lagged noticeably behind. As far back as 2016, China completed construction of a roughly 1,250-mile quantum communications network connecting Beijing and Shanghai, using a technique called quantum key distribution to theoretically create tamper-evident encrypted communications. If anyone tries to intercept a quantum key during transmission, the very act of observation disturbs the quantum state in a detectable way, alerting both ends of the communication that eavesdropping occurred. It's worth being honest, though, about where the technology genuinely stands today, rather than where marketing materials sometimes suggest it stands. The Defense Science Board has been notably candid on this point. While quantum key distribution sounds revolutionary in theory, the board has concluded that it has not yet been implemented with sufficient capability or security to be deployed for actual Department of Defense mission use. Part of the problem is a practical one. Quantum key distribution over long distances currently requires relay stations to boost and pass along the signal, and those relay points themselves can potentially be intercepted or compromised, creating a weak link in what's otherwise theoretically unbreakable security. The same board was equally blunt about another much-hyped concept, quantum radar, a theorized technology that many assumed could reliably detect stealth aircraft by exploiting quantum entanglement between photons. After serious evaluation, the Defense Science Board concluded that quantum radar, at least with current and foreseeable technology, will not provide any meaningfully upgraded capability to the Department of Defense. In other words, some of the most talked about quantum defense applications in popular science coverage are, according to the Pentagon's own scientific advisors, simply not going to deliver on their promise anytime soon, if ever. And separating that hype from genuine capability is exactly what programs like DARPA's Quantum Benchmarking Initiative are designed to do. There's also a workforce dimension to this race that rarely makes headlines, but matters just as much as the physics itself. Building and operating quantum systems, whether sensors or computers, requires a highly specialized talent pool that simply doesn't exist in large enough numbers yet, inside or outside government. The Pentagon has been actively trying to solve this bottleneck, including through new apprenticeship and skills-based hiring programs designed to pull in cyber and technical talent without requiring the traditional four-year degree pipeline that has historically slowed federal hiring to a crawl. Officials have pointed to tens of thousands of inquiries into these programs as an early sign that interest in this field is far higher than the current supply of trained specialists. Legislation has also pushed the services to establish public-private talent exchange programs, allowing researchers to move between industry labs and military research centers, cross-pollinating expertise in a field where breakthroughs often come from unexpected combinations of academic theory and hands-on engineering. This kind of clear-eyed skepticism actually matters, and it's a healthy sign rather than a discouraging one. It shows that the enormous sums of money now flowing into quantum defense programs aren't being spent blindly or based purely on futuristic hype. The Department of Defense requested $593.7 million for quantum technologies in the fiscal year 2026 budget, following an appropriation of $781.2 million in fiscal year 2025. Congress, for its part, has been steadily building the legal and institutional framework to support this investment for years, well before quantum computing became a mainstream headline topic. Provisions dating back to the fiscal year 2019 National Defense Authorization Act directed the Secretary of Defense to establish a formal quantum technology research and development program in coordination with the private sector, international partners, and other federal agencies. Later legislation authorized each branch of the military to establish its own dedicated quantum information science research centers, tasked each service with compiling and annually updating lists of technical challenges that quantum computers could realistically help solve within the next 1 to 3 years, created public-private talent exchange programs specifically focused on quantum research, and eventually directed DARPA itself to establish and run the very quantum benchmarking initiative we've been discussing. So where does all of this actually leave the United States military heading into the back half of this decade? The honest answer is somewhere in between overwhelming panic and casual dismissal, which is exactly where serious, disciplined technology planning is supposed to sit. The quantum computing threat to encryption is real, but it isn't imminent in the sense of happening next year, or even necessarily within the next 5 years. Current estimates from experts across government and industry generally place a cryptographically relevant quantum computer, one powerful enough to actually break today's standard encryption, somewhere in the 2030s, which is precisely why the Pentagon's own migration deadlines of 2030 and 2031 were chosen with real deliberation and urgency, not as arbitrary bureaucratic dates. At the same time, the harvest, now, decrypt later threat means the clock on protecting sensitive data effectively started running the moment adversaries began archiving encrypted communications, which, for all anyone knows, may already have been happening for years. Quantum sensing, meanwhile, represents something a little different, a nearer term, more tangible advantage that doesn't require waiting for a distant technological breakthrough at all. Submarine detection without sonar, jam-resistant precision timing that doesn't depend on vulnerable GPS satellites, electromagnetic sensing, sensitive enough to detect signals that would be completely invisible to conventional equipment. These aren't distant science fiction concepts anymore. They're capabilities the Pentagon is actively working to field within the next 2 to 3 years. Backed by real budget lines, formal executive orders, and dedicated program offices built specifically to accelerate their transition from laboratory prototype to combat-ready hardware. And quantum computing itself, the true fault-tolerant, utility-scale machine capable of transforming everything from military logistics and material science to cryptography and complex battlefield simulation, still sits roughly a decade away by DARPA's own official projections. But a decade in defense technology development is not actually a long runway. It's a narrow, closing window, and every major military power on Earth understands exactly what's genuinely at stake, and precisely why the race to get there first has already begun in earnest. What makes this particular moment in the story so consequential isn't a single dramatic breakthrough or a flashy new prototype revealed at a press conference. It's the sheer scale and coordination of the response happening across the entire United States government, all unfolding within the span of just a few weeks. 2 executive orders signed in a single day. A comprehensive 25-page cryptography strategy released 48 hours later. A $200 million sensing initiative launched almost simultaneously. 11 companies quietly competing and cooperating inside a rigorous DARPA verification program. Congressional legislation that's been steadily laying institutional groundwork for years, largely outside the public spotlight. Together, these pieces tell a much larger and more coherent story than any single headline ever could on its own. The story of a nation that sees a genuinely fundamental technological shift approaching on the horizon, and one that has clearly decided it cannot afford, under any circumstances, to be the second one to arrive. For the average American watching from the outside, none of this may feel immediate or personal. There's no siren, no visible event, nothing to point to on the evening news the way you might point to a missile test or a cyber attack on a pipeline. But the systems this technology protects, and the systems it threatens, touch daily life far more directly than most people realize, from the satellites guiding commercial flights to the financial networks moving money across the country every single second. A quiet, well-funded, methodically executed quantum strategy may never generate a dramatic headline of its own. That, in many ways, is precisely the point. Because in the end, that's really what this entire quantum defense strategy comes down to. Not a single breakthrough moment, not one dramatic headline, but a sustained, methodical, and deliberately hedged effort to make absolutely certain that whenever the quantum era of national security genuinely arrives, and virtually every serious expert now agrees that it eventually will, the United States isn't scrambling to catch up from behind. It's already there, waiting, prepared, and ready.